She sat in that lawyer's office for 22 minutes. And in those 22 minutes, 11 years of her life simply disappeared. Her name was Linda, I know acted and wife. And the story I'm about to tell you is one of the most quietly devastating betrayals I have ever come across. Not dramatic, not explosive, just slow and real and heartbreaking. Because this didn't happen in a movie. It happens in real American families. Maybe even families like yours. So stay with me, because this story matters. The woman who stayed, Linda Marsh, was 38 years old when her mother Dorothy had her first serious fall. It wasn't catastrophic, a fractured wrist, a bruised hip, but it was the moment Linda understood that something had shifted. Her mother was 70, living alone in the same house in suburban Ohio, where Linda and her brother Gary had grown up. And for the first time, Dorothy seemed small. Linda was working as an office manager for a dental practice at the time. She had a small apartment 20 minutes from her mother's house. She was dating someone, quietly, carefully, the way people do when they're not sure yet if it's something real. She told herself it would just be temporary, a few months. Help mom get back on her feet, hire someone to check in, maybe arrange some meal deliveries. That was the plan. Gary was living in Phoenix. He called on holidays, sometimes birthdays. And so, without much ceremony, Linda became the caregiver. She started going over every morning before work, then after work too, then some weekends, then most weekends. She arranged doctor appointments, she refilled prescriptions. She learned the names of every medication Dorothy took, 5 of them by year 2, 7 by year 5. She gave up the apartment. It just made more sense to move into the spare room at Mom's house. Cheaper for both of them, she told herself. More practical. She told herself a lot of things. What she didn't tell anyone, not even herself, not fully, was that she was slowly disappearing into this role. The relationship she'd been in quietly ended. Her coworkers threw her a small going-away party when she left the practice. She found a remote administrative job that paid less but gave her flexibility. Dorothy's needs grew, as they always do. By year 4, Linda was managing everything. Medications, insurance claims, grocery runs, physical therapy appointments, meals, housekeeping. Dorothy had good days and hard days. On the good days, she was funny and sharp and deeply grateful. She would reach over and squeeze Linda's hand and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you, sweetheart." Linda held on to those moments. She kept them like coins in a jar. And somewhere in those years, a quiet understanding formed between them. Not a legal document, not anything written down. Just a mother and daughter sitting at a kitchen table, talking honestly. "This house will be yours," Dorothy said one evening toward the end of year 6. "After I'm gone. You've given up so much. I want you to have something to show for it." Linda had nodded, not because of the house, but because it felt like her mother saw her. She never brought it up again. Neither did Dorothy. The brother who returned? Gary Marsh called on a Tuesday in November. Dorothy had just been diagnosed with congestive heart failure, stage 2. Serious, but manageable. The doctor had been clear. With proper care and medication, Dorothy could have another 2 or 3 years of reasonable quality of life. Gary said he was devastated by news. He said he wanted to be there more. He asked Linda how he could help. Linda, careful not to sound bitter, told him the truth. The appointments, the medications, the nights when Mom got confused and needed someone to sit with her. The financial strain of keeping the household running when Dorothy's Social Security barely covered property taxes and utilities. Jerry listened. He said, "I hear you, sis. I really do." He sent flowers that week, a nice arrangement. Billy's, Dorothy's favorite. And then 3 weeks passed. Nothing. Linda didn't say anything. She had learned, over the years, not to expect much from Gary. It hurt less that way. But then something changed. About 4 months before Dorothy passed, Barry started calling more. Not Linda, Dorothy. He would call their mother directly, in the evenings, when Linda was cleaning up after dinner or doing laundry. She could hear her mother laughing in the next room, the kind of soft, happy laugh Dorothy reserved for people she wanted to please. Then he started visiting. The first visit was for a long weekend. He brought gifts, chocolates. a cashmere throw blanket. He took Dorothy out to lunch at her favorite restaurant, just the two of them, while Linda stayed home and did the grocery run. Dorothy talked about it for days. Linda told herself she should be relieved. Gary was finally showing up. Mom was happy, that's what mattered. But there was something underneath her relief. Something she couldn't name. A quiet unease, like a draft from a door that should have been closed. She ignored it. She should not have. 9 days, Dorothy declined quickly in February. It wasn't unexpected. The doctors had warned Linda that congestive heart failure could move like that, slowly, and then all at once. Linda had reduced her work hours again. She was sleeping in the room next to her mother's, door open, one ear always half awake. Softly, Gary came to visit twice in February. Linda was grateful. She was exhausted, and having another adult in the house, even Gary, helped. On February 11th, a man came to the house while Linda was at the pharmacy picking up Dorothy's new prescription. She was gone for maybe 40 minutes. When she came back, Gary met her at the door, said Dorothy had been resting, said a family friend had stopped by to say hello. Linda didn't think much of it. She should have. Dorothy passed away on February 20th. Peacefully, in her own bed. Linda was holding her hand. Gary was in the guest room. He came in a few minutes before the end, and Linda was glad, despite everything, that Dorothy didn't die alone. The funeral was quiet. Dorothy had wanted it that way. And then, 2 weeks later, came the call from the attorney. The reading of the will. The reading? Linda wore the same black cardigan she worn to the funeral. She drove herself. She told herself it was just a formality, a legal procedure, that the conversation she and her mother had in year 6, the house will be yours, would be reflected in whatever documents her mother had prepared. Well, she had never actually seen the will. It hadn't seemed important to ask. Gary was already seated when she arrived. He didn't make eye contact. The attorney, a thin man in a gray suit, introduced himself and began to speak in the calm, measured tone that attorneys use when they are about to change someone's life. Dorothy Marsh's estate, he explained, had been updated on February 11th. February 11th, 9 days before Dorothy died. The house, left to Gary. The savings account, approximately $67,000, left to Gary. The small investment account Dorothy had held for 30 years, left to Gary. I think the only way to Gary is that Linda received a pearl necklace, a jewelry box, and a handwritten note her mother had apparently left with the attorney, which said simply, "Linda, you have always been my strength. I hope you understand." She didn't understand. She didn't understand at all. She sat in that office for 22 minutes. She asked the attorney 3 questions. She got 3 careful, legal, non-answers. She signed a form acknowledging she had been present at the reading. And then she walked to her car, sat down, and didn't move for a long time. 11 years. 11 years of her life. And she left with a pearl necklace and a note she didn't understand. The questions. Linda is not the kind of person who falls apart. She is the kind of person who makes lists. So she made a list. Who knew about the will change? When exactly did that man visit on February 11th? What was Gary's relationship with the attorney Dorothy had apparently used? Had Dorothy ever mentioned changing her will, even once? The answers came slowly, and they were not reassuring. Her mother's neighbor, Ruth, a quiet woman in her 60s who had known Dorothy for decades, called Linda 2 weeks after the reading. She said she had been thinking about whether to reach out. She said she didn't want to cause trouble. But she had seen something on February 11th that she couldn't stop thinking about. A man in a suit had arrived at Dorothy's house at around 2 in the afternoon. Gary had let him in. They had been inside for about an hour. When the man left, he was carrying a manila folder. Ruth had thought it was odd at the time, but she hadn't said anything. Now she was saying something. Linda hired an elder law attorney named Martin Calloway. She brought him everything she had, the timeline, Ruth's account, the name of the attorney Gary had apparently arranged to visit their mother, the date of the will change. Martin listened carefully. He said, "Linda, what you're describing, a will change made 9 days before death, arranged by a family member who stood to benefit, with the testator in a medically compromised state, That is exactly the kind of situation that warrants a serious look. He told her about something called undue influence. When someone in the position of power, a family member, a caretaker, anyone, uses that position to manipulate a vulnerable person into making legal decisions it might not otherwise make. He said it was difficult to prove, but not impossible. Then Linda remembered the voicemail. The voicemail. In the weeks after Dorothy passed, Linda had been slowly going through her mother's things. She hadn't been able to finish. It was too hard. She'd gotten through the closet and half the dresser before she had to stop. But one afternoon, sorting through her mother's bedside table, she found Dorothy's old cell phone. The battery was dead. She found the charger buried in a drawer. She plugged it in, waited, and when the screen finally lit up, she saw something that made her breath catch. The voicemail, in the drafts folder, recorded on February 12th, one day after the will change. Never sent. She pressed play. Dorothy's voice was thin, tired, but clear. "Linda, sweetheart, I need you to know something. Gary brought a man to the house yesterday. He said it was about protecting the estate. He said you would be taken care of. He said this was the right thing." A long silence on the recording. Then Dorothy's voice again, quieter. "I don't know if I did the right thing. I was so tired. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want you to be angry with me. You've given me everything, Linda. Everything. Please don't forget that I know that." And then the recording ended. Serious tone. Linda sat on the floor of her mother's bedroom for a long time. She wasn't crying. She was listening to the silence. And then she called Martin Calloway. The truth, the voicemail changed everything. Martin filed a formal challenge to the will, citing undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. The grounds: Dorothy's medical condition at the time of the signing, the circumstances under which the signing was arranged, and the recorded statement Dorothy had made one day after, expressing confusion, exhaustion, and doubt about what she had agreed to. The process was not fast. It was not dramatic. It was months of legal correspondence, depositions, and document reviews. Very hired his own attorney. He maintained that Dorothy had been of sound mind, that she had made her own decision, that Linda was simply bitter and had always expected more than she deserved. But Martin had the voicemail. And he had Ruth's testimony about the man in the suit and the manila folder. And he had Dorothy's medical records from February, records that showed her cognitive scores had dropped significantly in the final 3 weeks of her life. The estate attorney Gary had used to arrange the will change was also investigated. His license was reviewed by the state bar. It emerged that this was not the first time he had been connected to a late-stage will change arranged by a family member standing to benefit. It was a quiet scandal. Not front-page news, but real. The will challenge was settled 8 months after Dorothy's death. The settlement was private. Linda cannot discuss the specific figures, but she did receive the house. She did receive a portion of the savings account. And Gary, who had already begun spending the inheritance, found himself in a very different financial and legal position than he had anticipated. The estate attorney surrendered his license. Gary did not face criminal charges. But what he had done, and how he had done it, was now part of a documented legal record. Linda moved back into the house, her mother's house, the one Dorothy had always said would be hers. She repainted the kitchen. She kept the pearl necklace on the windowsill above the sink, where it catches the morning light. She still has the voicemail saved, not as evidence anymore, just to hear her mother's voice. Linda told me once that the hardest part wasn't the money. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing that her mother, in the fog of illness and exhaustion and fear, had made a decision she didn't fully understand, and had lived her final 9 days carrying the weight of it alone. She didn't send the voicemail, Linda said. "I've thought about why 1,000 times. I think she was afraid I'd be upset with her. Or maybe she thought it would work itself out. She always thought things would work themselves out." Linda is 51 now. She still works remotely. She has a small garden in the backyard, something she never had time for before. She talks to a therapist once a week. She says it helps. She doesn't talk to Gary anymore. She doesn't have to. And sometimes, On quiet mornings, she sits at the kitchen table with her coffee, and she thinks about those 11 years, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with something harder to name. She thinks about the coins in the jar, all those moments her mother squeezed her hand and said, "I don't know what I'd do without you, sweetheart." She kept them. She still has everyone. And no one, no attorney, no brother, no last-minute will, could ever take those away from her. If you are caring for someone right now, quietly, without recognition, without thanks, this story is for you. What you're doing matters. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Even when no one sees it. Even then.